And I want to offer my three practices, maybe my top three, at least my top three this week. And the first practice is this, is brainwashing. So I've told this story before about a friend of mine that was involved in a spiritual community, and he went to his teachers one time and said, I think you're brainwashing me. And they said, we are, because your brain needs washing. And sometimes our brain needs washing. I know for myself, I do this often when needed, when I can see things about myself, when I can see myself getting so consumed with the external that I lose touch with the internal. When I find myself literally physically not able to read or to keep point, to be distracted, that I realize, I need to practice some mental hygiene. I need to brainwash. And how I brainwash best, and here's my first practice, engage in a good book, a novel, not a self-help book, not a manual on how to do something, not 7 easy steps, but literature, a novel. Because when we read a book, it engages our imagination and we become active in it. We begin to visualize things. Things begin to happen. C.K. Chesterton says this, fairy tales do not tell children that dragons exist. Children already know dragons exist. Fairy tales tell children that dragons can be killed. In other words, we read literature not because we believe what we're reading is true, because it tells us that true things are possible in our life. And so that's the first practice, is get a good book that will take you far and engage in that. The second practice is this, is to take on something impossible. Right now, in this age, in this movement of our evolution, what we are experiencing are impossible things. A couple weeks ago, we saw a vehicle land on Mars. And if you were to ask us a decade ago about going to Mars, that would have been impossible. All of us are experiencing what it feels like to live through a global pandemic. And if I had asked any of you a year ago what it would be like to be in a pandemic, what would you say? Oh, that's impossible. That could never possibly happen. A global plan, a national plan? No. And yet here we are. Impossible. Or, for myself, one that is painful but is urging me to expand is, a couple months ago, our nation's capital, one of the most sacred buildings in our nation, the seat of Congress, was taken over during an insurrection. Ask anybody if they would have ever thought this country could have something like that happen. Impossible. It would never happen. So there you are. Impossible things are happening all the time. So what about you? What personally in your life have you said it's impossible to take it on, and to watch how taking on that project changes you? I'm reminded of the speech that John F. Kennedy gave in 1962 about going to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win, and others too. So what is that story that you tell yourself about something that you'd say to yourself, but that's impossible? Yes, but watch what happens to you when you take on something greater than yourself. And then the third is this, and I don't know if the first or the third is my favorite, but it's this, to find at least one day a week that you get to go off leash. The ancient Hebrews called it a Sabbath, where we unplug from all the things that bind us so that we begin to experience a level of freedom, an openness, new opportunities. We can rest. We begin to see new possibilities, and we can listen. and we can hear that still, small voice that reveals itself when we're quiet. And so, find some good literature. Take on something impossible. Take the leash and the collar off and romp and run and play and stay in your seat and listen. Are you listening?